Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vanderbilt has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. After months of waiting, it is finally game week. Marquette will tip off against the Vanderbilt Commodores in Annapolis, Maryland, this Friday, November 11th at 6:30 p.m. Eric, it's been a long wait. Friday night can't get here soon enough.
It really can't. I know we're all excited to see Marquette at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. There are a lot of storylines at play here. I think we're excited to kick it off.
Yeah, so from time to time, folks, we're going to bring on folks who are knowledgeable about the programs that Marquette is facing. The first time we're doing that this year is with our friend Adam Sparks, who is the Vanderbilt beat reporter for the Tennessean. He covers Vanderbilt football, so he's in the middle of that, but he also covers Vanderbilt men's basketball. Adam, thanks for joining the show today.
Hey, good to be on. Yeah, it's hit very quickly. At Vanderbilt, it's usually brief optimism during football, but a lot of heightened optimism once you get to basketball. It's a basketball school, and that's where the tradition is. So there's a whole lot of people excited about this, and especially the fact that there's a new coach in Bryce Drew. The program has been up for a little while, but I think there's a whole lot of enthusiasm going into this year because of some of the changes in the coaching staff.
Yeah, so kind of looking at big picture at the Vanderbilt program, you mentioned a lot of those things there. From the outside looking in, it's going to be a really different team and kind of program overall that takes the court this year. Obviously, Coach Drew, who's had a successful career to this point and is really taking the next step forward in his career at Vanderbilt. You guys had a couple of first-round draft picks, Wade Baldwin and Damian Jones, who are now in the NBA. Just kind of big picture, what are you expecting this team to look like on Friday night and kind of throughout the season? What's the, what have you seen throughout the summer as Bryce Drew's taken the helm?
I think for me, I'm a little bit of a realist in that I don't make the assumption that this team is going to be better than last season. Last season, there was pretty high expectations. A lot of people thought this was a team that could challenge Kentucky to win the SEC. They underachieved. Their coach, Kevin Stallings, left and took a job at Pitt. I think he was nudged out the door. And it was a team that just never quite came together. And then when they lost the 2 first-round draft picks that you mentioned, I think losing those 2 players balanced out with the new coaching staff, maybe this team is about what last year's was. But I think it's hard to replace 2 first-round draft picks. And so I tend to think this Vanderbilt team may be a little slow going in picking up Bryce Drew's system and maybe meeting the expectations they thought they would meet last year. It's still a talented enough group. Luke Cornett is he's the best player on the team. He's 7'1", senior. He'll probably be an NBA draft pick after this season. So they do have a star. They do have a proven star. They have a whole lot of shooters. Vanderbilt traditionally has been a program that produces a lot of shooters, and that's what this team primarily has. Bryce Drew was a really big pickup in the offseason because, anytime you have an opening in coaching, you want to figure out where you stand in the pecking order of other programs. And Vanderbilt, actually, with Kevin Stallings, had the longest tenured coach in the SEC. So they had not gone through a coaching search, and I think it was 14, 15 years. So to get a coach like Bryce Drew, who had some name recognition as a player. He hit a lot of people remember the shot, as it's called, that he hit to beat Ole Miss when he was a player at Valparaiso in the '98 NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
and he's had and he's had, and it's easy to YouTube if if anybody's too young to have seen it. But and then he's had plenty of success as a coach at Valparaiso, going to the NCAA, going to the NIT, and good young, I think 42-year-old coach. It's kind of revitalized the program, and People feel good about the program right now. I think there's a little caution, though, about feeling good about this initial team that he has.
Given the departure of Wade Baldwin and Damian Jones, we have seen a lot of Luke Cornett. We know that he's certainly their best defender. But can you tell us a little bit about some of the other guys on this team who might make an impact and really fill the void in minutes and impact, specifically Matthew Fisher-Davis or four-star combo guard Peyton Willis may also step up here?
Yeah, so they've got Luke Cornett, as I mentioned, is a 7'1". He's listed as a forward because you're going to see him step out and shoot threes. I think it's safe to say the best three-point shooting big man in the country. Think of kind of a poor man's college version of maybe a Dirk Nowitzki, that type of player. And then aside from him, I mean, they've got good pieces around him. Jeff Roberson is kind of a do-everything type combo guy, 6'6" forward. He can play on the wing. He can play more of the like kind of a stretch four. Matthew Fisher-Davis is their top returning scorer. He was the top three-point shooter in the SEC last year. He's a long, slender, shoot it from 30 feet if he needs to type of guy. You're going to see him, and it should show up in game one against Marquette that he's going to take on a larger role. He's been a catch-and-shoot type guy, and Vandy under Kevin Stallings had a catch-and-shoot offense. What they have now is more, under Bryce Drew, is supposed to be more of a dribble drive type offense. Guys have to put the ball on the floor, have to drive the ball, and so Fisher-Davis this will be his first game attempting to do that, to expand his game. I think they've got some major holes in the two guys that they lost. Damian Jones was a legit 7-foot NBA center. Like I mentioned, they have Cornett back, but they don't have another proven big guy. Cornett is more of an athletic type guy that can shoot and step out. They don't have another guy besides Cornett that's played major minutes over 6'7". So they have a lot of the tweener type guys, not really the legit big men. But I think even more than that, I think they can absorb that loss of Damian Jones. The bigger loss is Wade Baldwin, who's now with the Memphis Grizzlies. They don't have a true point guard on the roster that's played. Peyton Willis is a true freshman who may get the start at point and will at least play it some. I think there's a better chance that you guys will see Riley LaChance play the point. He's a two-guard, always has been a two-guard. He ran a little point in high school, and that's about the extent of it. They've got 3 or 4 different guys that can try to play the point guard. If I'm Marquette, I attack that immediately. Make Vanderbilt show that they do have a point guard, they can handle the ball. Because to this point, there's not really a guy on the roster that you can say, that's the guy that handled the ball, 80% of the time. They just don't have that. It's going to have to be more by committee. So I would expect Marquette is going to recognize that, and other teams will recognize that throughout the year, that they don't have really a true point guard on the roster.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. For a number of years, we've been kind of short on scholarship players, but this year is the first year really in his coaching tenure where we're going to be able to, run hockey lineup changes out there if we really want to. So, let's keep the bodies fresh so we can maybe press a little bit more, a three-quarter press. So I think that point that you made about, who handles the ball for Vanderbilt is going to be particularly relevant in this game. You mentioned a little bit about Luke Cornett. Behind him, there aren't many people who can fill that kind of center role. It's the same case for Marquette. We have Luke Fisher, who is our center, locked in. But we've seen from him throughout the years that he has a propensity to get in foul trouble. Is it a similar case for Luke? How does he handle fouls? Does he get in foul trouble, or is that something that hasn't been an issue for him?
Well, it's funny because last year, this will be a different role for him because offensively he's going to have to score it more. Last year he was kind of the second, third option. But defensively he was third, I think, in the country last year in blocks per game, and he's a good defender. But he's primarily been a guy as a help defender, a guy that can play really good as a tandem guy with Damian Jones. Anytime you have 2 7-footers in a college game like that, they can really play off of each other. So he doesn't have that partner now in the lane. So they're going to have to figure out how to protect him. That's another thing with opponents, beginning with Marquette, is if you can drive at Cornett and get him into foul trouble, Obviously, you take the biggest and the best body off of the floor. It's just with this team, there's a lot of different guys that have played major minutes and been on teams that have won, but they're just not. They're just going to do something different now. I mentioned Fisher Davis is going to have to drive it. He's no longer just a shooter. Cornette is going to have to be the primary scorer and going to have to be a lone defender in the middle without help. A guy like Jeff Roberson, who has been kind of their cleanup guy, garbage guy, rebound defender, he's going to have to score it more. They just got so many of these guys that it's an unknown if they can take on a larger role or if they're just role players. That's the big thing I think that people are going to watch in this Marquette game is does Vandy have an assembly of role players, or do they have guys that have filled roles but they're ready to step forward and take on kind of the scoring load and the defending load?
One of the biggest storylines for Marquette coming into the season is the incoming transfer talent we have, and really their ability collectively to shoot the three. Rousey, Caton, Reinhard, we are really excited about increasing our performance and really our output from the line, from the three-point line this season. That said, we know that Vanderbilt last year was incredibly efficient at defending the three, finishing fourth in the entire nation in three-point field goal percentage allowed. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe how that's affected by the departures that this team has seen, and if they still have that potential to dominate really the arc at both ends?
Well, they have a lot of versatile type guys, a lot of combo, 6'4" to 6'7" type guys that can play at least two, if not three or more positions. I think that's helped them match up well. Guys that can play out in space, that can defend out at the 3-point line, but still have a lot of length to get in shooters' faces. Jeff Roberson is one of those that I mentioned. Matthew Fisher Davis, another 6'5", 6'6" type guys that can defend guards. So that helped them some last year. I will say their best perimeter disruptor as far defensively was Wade Baldwin last year, and obviously he's gone. He wasn't necessarily the guy that would block shots or that would get out on shooters as well, but he was a guy that would get into the lane, slap the ball away, or a guy that would get steals and start on the break. I think Vandy may still have that guy, a guy named Joe Toy, a 6'7" guard forward sophomore. He played quite a bit as a freshman last year. Looked real good in Vanderbilt's lone NCAA tournament game. I think there's a possibility for him to fill part of that role. Defensively, they've got versatile guys. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to run with Bryce Drew. I have more confidence in what they're going to run offensively. It's going to be more of a 4-out, 1-in, that one being Luke Cornette, and then you've just got shooters sitting around on the arc, and you would think trying to drive the ball. That's what they want to do with him. But defensively, I don't really know. I think he does have enough pieces that he can move people around, but I think it's going to be kind of a hit and miss early on, and that's the good and the bad of having a first-year coach is. The opponent does not know what to expect, but also the team hasn't really worked into what they're expected to do. So it'll be a surprise on both sides of the floor, I would guess.
Well, I tell you, at this time of the year, I always have the most confidence in my team, and with every day as the season draws closer, I think they're going to look better and better. So, Adam, if we're going to be making all of our predictions for the game later in the show, but I would love to hear your thoughts on how you think this contest will sort out on Friday night, which way you see it going, and what do you think some of the primary factors are going to be in determining the outcome?
Well, not knowing Marquette's roster this year all that well, knowing them more as their tradition, and especially the success they had just a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I guess it'd be. I would expect it would be an up and down type game. I would expect there to be a whole lot of shooting on both sides. This being a somewhat unfamiliar court, whoever comes out with a hot hand and feels comfortable in that gym, it's gonna. That's going to make a difference, I think, because I think there are shooters on both rosters. I think Cornette, he's had a little bit of health issues, injury issues in the preseason. If he's over those, I would expect he would play pretty well. He adapts to home, road, wherever very well. I guess if I had to pick, I'll pick the team that I cover with very little knowledge of what to expect from them. I do think they have enough pieces that they can go out play a different style than they're used to, and still win the game. But honestly, I do think this is a toss-up game. I think whoever wins this game feels pretty good after the opener that they may have a postseason type team, because I think it'll be a quality win either way.
That said, Adam, any season-long predictions here for Vanderbilt in the SEC and perhaps in a potential tournament berth?
Well, the fact that they barely eked into the NCAA last year with an underachieving team, I think that's about where they would get if they were an overachieving team this year. I think bottom of the NCAA or high NIT is probably reasonable with what they lost last year. It's going to be tough. But I think the big thing is whether or not the SEC is going to be – if the SEC is good, then Vandy can maybe get into the tournament because I think they'll have more quality wins. If the SEC is down, which it's been the past few years aside from Kentucky, then they're not going to get many teams in out of that conference to get in the NCAA, and it would be hard for Vandy to get in. So I think Vandy will be a bubble team whether or not they get in. Obviously, that's a whole lot of games away. But the Marquette win or loss, it'll be a quality game, so I think it'll look good on their schedule.
Well, Adam, thanks so much for joining the show today. We're looking forward to this matchup here in a few days. I agree. I think it's going to be an up-and-down game, and I think it's going to be entertaining, and whoever comes out on top is definitely going to have a lot to feel good about. We appreciate you taking the time to join the show today, and hopefully talk to you soon.
Thanks, Adam.
All right, no problem, guys. Good to be on.
All right, so at this point, we're going to go ahead and bring in all the other fellows. In addition to myself and Eric, we have Brian Henry and Pete Mohan now joining us. Fellows, so I think we got a great overview of what we can expect from Vanderbilt from Adam. Switching gears just a little bit let's talk about Marquette and kind of what our expectations are going into the first game of the season, third year of Steve Wojciechowski's tenure at Marquette. It's a big year. We're going to learn a lot about the trajectory of his time at Marquette this season. Brian Henry, what are your expectations for this game? Big picture, small picture. What are you looking for and looking to learn?
When it comes to this basketball game this Friday, I think the expectation is, honestly, I think it's to win. It's not to say like, oh, it's a must-win by any means. I think Marquette has an opportunity where they're going to be the more experienced team on the floor. I think they're going to be a more well-rounded basketball team at day one. Now, that's assuming some of the guys perform like we think they're capable of performing. But I think the expectation is to win this game. I think it could be very likely will be tight. But I think the expectation is to win.
I don't disagree with that. My expectation is whether we win or lose, it needs to be close. I want to see something defensively from this team. I want to see a fire lit underneath them. And I maybe except for a couple games last year we saw that. We need to see that consistently this year because competing day in, day out in the Big East and with the non-con we have to bring the defensive pressure. And whether that comes from hockey change lineups or Wojo's pulling something out of his hat. We need to see that.
Pete, I think you'd agree. We were talking about it before we started recording. This is an opportunity for a Vanderbilt team that does not have a true point guard. This is an opportunity to, unleash the hounds, press, zigzag guards up and down the floor, challenge passing lanes, and really you can overplay passing lanes. Be overly aggressive for stretches and see if you can get yourself a bunch of easy buckets off turnovers. I think that's a fair way you would think they'd probably approach going into this game. I mean, if you're Wojo, that's how you're scouting it, right?
We have a point guard, and they really don't. They have a bunch of combo guys that are moderately decent at handling the ball, but have never really been depended on to distribute. And I think personnel-wise, that's the advantage that we have. Because when you go through the overview that you had with Adam Sparks earlier, he basically described a mirror image roster compared to ours. You got one big guy in the middle, shooters on the outside, a lot of tweeners, But he did say they lack that point guard, and I think that Tracy needs to be assertive and take command, and we need to use our length to disrupt those passing lanes, as Brian mentioned.
We're mentioning Tracy Carter. He didn't start in the exhibition game.
Wow.
Marcus Howard started at the 1 over Tracy Carter. So we'll see what happens Friday, right, Eric? But that wasn't something we were expecting, or at least I wasn't. I was surprised.
No, certainly not. I think given, our conversation with Adam earlier and what we know about this Vanderbilt team, it will be interesting because we do mirror their roster construction almost identically. They shoot almost 40% from three and have some guys that shoot, specifically, I think Matthew Fisher-Davis shoots closer to 48% from three last season. We're going to need to guard the perimeter and be really dogged and really close out on these guys.
That's not just the perimeter. That's guarding him when he comes over half court. 48% is ridiculous.
Exactly right. I mean, this is a guy with Jimmer type range. I know.
Reaching back for Jimmer, I like it.
We have a guy like that in Rousey, we think, but we're going to really need to guard these guys close on the perimeter. Again, Luke Cornett, another guy with range. This, I think, we can expect to see, players 1 through 5 on the floor at Vanderbilt who can shoot.
In terms of the personnel, Marquette's roster may be a little bit more deep than Vanderbilt's. And Wojo, he ran a little more zone last year than maybe he would have wanted to. And I think
that was necessity zone more than
right, exactly. And now
zone.
that we got the bodies, we can run people out there and chase them around man to man. And I'm interested to see how things go down defensively with man to man against a roster that looks similar to ours. Can our guys win those one-on-one battles? Is Fisher up to the task of taking down Cornett?
You mentioned having a deep roster. When was the last time we could confidently say that we have a deep roster and that we have a number of bodies we could go to? It's at this point in the season where when we get closer and closer to game day that I always Rousey can shoot, Caton can shoot. Oh, we're going to be pretty good. This is like the optimist dream right here, and then I'm going to come crashing to reality on Friday night.
It looks good on paper. The exhibition game showed some things. Those that went to Madness showed something. I think it's the eternal optimist view. That's not saying I'm expecting it's going to go in and be bad, but we think we're deep. Are we? I think Friday will help give us a greater picture of that.
All signs were sounding like Sam Hauser is looking pretty good. I didn't get a chance to catch any of the game, but I know some of you fellas did. Is it real?
I think it very well might be, and I think the big picture point of regardless of who we're talking about, whether it's Howard or Hauser, I mean, the rotations are going to be fascinating to see. You already mentioned Wojo kind of surprised by starting Howard. Granted, it's an exhibition game. How much you want to read into that, honest to God, I don't. I mean, he could have just been sending a message to Tracy. He could have just been like, yep, we're just going to put this 5 out there because we're playing a Division 2 or 3 school from Missouri, and great.
He wanted to get the new guy minutes.
Right.
The new guys played the most minutes.
Howard's going to have, whether he starts or not, he's going to be a contributor this year. That guy's going to get on the floor. We need him to shoot the ball well. Right. That very well could have just been that. The biggest story of the game is the Fisher Cornett matchup in the post and on the perimeter because he plays from the three-point line and in, and Luke's going to have to guard that. And the rest it's not really a key. It's more of who's going to play together and how Wojo's going to substitute and assemble his lineups and which lineups are most successful. It's really a science experiment on Friday.
Do you think Helt spells Fisher briefly on Cornett, or do you think that job is given solely to Reinhardt?
Personally, I think he does. I think it's the length of that time will be determined by his play. They need somebody with size at 7'1", 250 plus. I mean you need to match size with size there. Sliding over somebody that's 6'7", I think you're just asking to get yourself into trouble. So Helt's gonna play. He'll determine how long he stays on the floor.
How big of an impact do you think Luke Fisher's potential foul trouble will have on the outcome of the game? And do you expect him to get his fouls early and often, or do you think he'll have the ability to stay on the court?
If you're Vanderbilt, what is your offensive game plan?
Attack.
You're going right at him. You know that Marquette is not deep at that position, kind of like Vanderbilt is as well. I think you're going to see more than half of their first offensive sets before that first media timeout are going to be post-ups and isolations on the wing with their big going up against Fisher, and they're going to let him try and draw fouls. Absolutely. That's what I'd do. They'd be crazy not to.
If you're Fisher, are you fronting?
No, because he's big enough. He's big enough and strong enough to where I think he can play behind him. And I'd like to see this guy hit a couple tough shots with, somebody of Fisher's skill and stature challenging him. But again, you got to do it without fouling. Fouling.
Shifting gears just a little bit here, we want to switch over to making predictions for the first game. And this is something we're going to do every episode, every game, making predictions, and we're going to tally them up throughout the course of the year and then use it as a measuring stick to determine which podcaster is the smartest and ultimately the best. So the first one we wanted to take a shot at for the Vanderbilt game coming up here on Friday is the number of turnovers. So if we set the over-under 13 turnovers, what do you think Marquette ends up with?
I think we'll probably hit the over in this game. No matter how you slice it, it's the first game of the season for both teams. No offense, Rockers. It's a whole lot of new guys on the roster. It's a new point guard / point guards for Vanderbilt. And they're going to be pressing the ball as much as we are probably because outside of Tracy, we really don't have any primary ball handlers on this team. We'll see what Howard can do. We're looking at 16, 17.
Seems high to me. I'm going to go the under. I think although Vanderbilt is longer and can be certainly disruptive, and this is the first game of the season for Marquette, I'm going to go the under. It's also Vanderbilt's first game with a new coach. I think there's a chance that they look sloppier. Give me the under.
Eric Pond, you are preaching to my choir. Give me the over, but I agree with your point on it is going to be a sloppy basketball game for both teams. This is not going to be in the instructional for young kids on how to play the sport. I do not think that is going to be the case on Friday. They go over on turnovers, but I think Vandy's going to be up there too, and they're still going to give them a chance to win.
I think we've got as we mentioned earlier, with increased depth and our ability to run a lot of people out there, I think we're going to be pressuring the ball quite a bit, and I think it's going to happen before the half-court line. So I see us forcing quite a few. You look at Vanderbilt, they're not an incredibly young team. They only have 2 freshmen. They have some transfers and kids who haven't played for Vanderbilt before. That being said, I still think we can force some turnovers on their end. I do think we don't have a primary ball handler, but I do think we have some pretty good ball handlers on this team. So I'm going to take the under as well. I think we go under 13 turnovers. I think they pull it out and have a great game, the first game of the season.
Maybe a story we're potentially overlooking with all the pressing we're anticipating we're going to be doing. Maybe it's the foul trouble for guys in the backcourt more than it is the bigs like Fisher. Just something to consider.
I hope to God we don't have 5+ turnovers on entry passes. I mean, we've been working with Luke in the middle for quite some time now. If they haven't figured out how to make an entry pass by now, then we are in serious trouble.
All right, so we got Pete Mohan and Brian Henry on over 13 turnovers for Marquette in the first game, and Eric Pond and Mike Lavender on the under for turnovers in the first game. Let's turn to opponent points in the paint. We're going to set the over-under here at 29. Brian Henry, where do you think we fall on that spectrum?
I think that's a really good line. If Vandy is hovering around 40 in the high 30s, I think it's going to be a very, very long day because I think we know they're going to come in and shoot it reasonably well. And if they're getting to the rim as well, it'll be a long day. I am going to roll. Again, we haven't seen this team, so we're kind of just guessing right now with how it's going to look. I'm going to take the under on that. I think their interior defense is, God am I hoping, is improved, and they're able to keep Vanderbilt away from the basket slightly better than average.
Boy, is this one hard to predict. I would say that it really depends on how much the Bryce Drew effect is really in motion at Vanderbilt right now. It is set up as a team for catch and shoot. Again, that goes a little bit against what Bryce Drew might be trying to implement at Vanderbilt, and he may be trying to see a little bit more dribble drive action.
So are you taking over or under?
Give me the under. I'm going to take the under. I think this is still a team that is going to rely on the catch and shoot just based on the roster construction.
We all should have gone reverse jinx and gone with the over just to be safe. That way we'd be happy when it came to the under.
I'm going with the over. If you really want to trust the source, you got to listen to me here. All right. We're going with the over, obviously. With Just Luke Fisher in the middle. That's our defensive post presence.
Even Luke Cornett likes to. He's a stretch big. Like I think Luke.
That's the thing. Like he takes he's 50-50 on jump shots and then posting up around the basket. I think that
I agree that they're going to try to place an emphasis on their shooting, but Marquette has to run them off the line if they want to be successful.
Absolutely have to. You're right.
So I think they're going to funnel some of that inside, and we're going to, maybe pick our poison, see what they can do. Unfortunately, I do think Luke will have some foul trouble, and with Helton there, I just think we're definitely going to give over 29 in the paint.
The higher scoring this game is, I think the worse it gets. I don't see us playing a shootout right out of the get-go, and with the way Vandy shoots it, they can hang 80 on you if you catch them on the wrong night. So we'll have to see how that goes, but for the love of God, try to take one area away from them.
All right, I'm gonna register here at the over as well. I'm gonna side with Pete Mohan. I think it's easy to throw out Luke's name, Luke Cornett, a bunch, and he's certainly going to be a threat. But they also have guys like Jeff Roberson, who are experienced guys. They were used relatively high amounts last year, returning, have kind of the skills necessary to get into the paint and drive to the hole. So I think we're going to be well over that, somewhere in the mid to high 30s.
Be some serious Luke on Luke crime in this game.
Yeah. So in terms of additions made to the roster over this past offseason, our three-point shooting power has really been augmented quite significantly. Between Marcus Howard, Sam Hauser, you can make the argument there, Andrew Rousey and Caton Reinhardt, who is not necessarily known as a three-point shooter, but he's definitely a scorer. Not setting an over-under here, how many threes do you think we see from Marquette? Not from any particular player, but just overall, how many threes do you think we get from Marquette against Vanderbilt?
I'll just start and say I think that we hit 9 threes in this game. I think that it's going to be a major component of the offense throughout the season, just because that's one of our strengths now going forward. Fortunately, we'll probably have to launch quite a few. I think that we'll probably end up shooting around the 33 to 35%. Maybe a 9 for 27 type night. Envision something like that. So, give me 9.
27 threes is a lot of shooting from behind the arc in a 40-minute college game. I think if we're up around 8-9, I think we win the game. I think it's probably Mohan's number of 7 sounds about right. Give me 7.
Mohan didn't say 7.
Oh, well, never mind. Then I say 7.
Eric, what do you got?
I'll take 8. I think it's going to be a tough game, though, at the perimeter for Marquette, and I think it's going to be probably one of the hardest goes we may have all year shooting the 3. This is a Vanderbilt team. We can't forget that really specialized in guarding the perimeter last year. They finished 4th in the entire nation in three-point field goal percentage allowed last year, giving up just 29.4%. So,
how much of that scheme is retained, though, with the new coaching regime?
Well, I think they lose some of it in really the talent that they lost, primarily in Wade Baldwin. But I think the team's still built around these sort of rangy, really stretchy kind of combo guys that really help them guard the perimeter quite a bit better than your typical team.
All right, I'm just gonna throw my hat in the ring here at 8 too. I think that's actually, you know what? No, I'm not. I'm gonna say 6. I think we go low. I think we have first game jitters. I think we got a lot of shooters. I think someone finds their stroke, but I think it comes from mainly one guy who gets a majority, though someone gets hot. But I don't think it's a full team effort in this first game. I pray to God I'm wrong.
All right, so if you think that Marquette makes 6 3-pointers, 18 points, where are the rest of the points coming from? Are they coming at the line? Are they coming through Luke in the paint? Are they coming with mid-range jumpers? I mean, how do you envision the breakdown of how we're going to score, especially if we're only able to make 6 3-pointers?
So I think it's going to come from driving and getting into the lane. I think throughout the year last year, they ran a lot of plays either for Dwayne Wilson, for Juwan Johnson, Sam Hauser, I think, is a threat to do this. Bodies that, whether they're big or whether they're physical and shifty and can get into the lane and get to the hole, I think that's where you're going to see a lot of our points come from, or where they're going to try to get a lot of their points from. I think some of them do come from Luke Fisher, but that situation to me with the other Luke, I think there is, there's too much up in the air right there. But I think, if what we've seen continues from Wojo on the offensive side from the past couple of years, I think you're going to see a lot of bodies flying to the hole and a lot of bodies trying to rebound after that first attempt. So I think we get a lot of putbacks and a lot of shots going to the hole.
God, I hope we have a good offensive rebounding performance, because I think we're going to need it.
I hate to be this guy.
Do you really hate to be the one to bring it up, though?
I feel like the refs are going to have an impact in this game. We talked to Adam earlier, and he goes, I think it's a toss-up. I think that the refs, if it's a toss-up, they'll have an impact. And I hope it's not because we're screaming at the TV that Luke's got 3 in the first, 12 minutes.
Oh, they always have an impact on every game. Give me a break.
Yeah. All right, so as Pete Mohan just foreshadowed there, we're going to move into final predictions for the first game of the Marquette basketball season. Intriguing, no? So I want you each to give whether you think it's going to be a win-loss and by how many points that win or loss will come. Eric, I'm going to start with you. How do you think Marquette fares in the first game of the season in the third year of Steve Wojciechowski?
I think this is going to be a tight game. I think it's going to be real back and forth, up and down. I think it's going to depend on how well both sides shoot and both sides, again, defend the perimeter and are able to run guys off the line. I'm going to take Marquette, and I'm going to take Marquette by 5.
Okay, by 5. Put it in the books. Brian Henry, what do you think?
I hope you all have bought your tickets for the Hanif Cheatham coming out party. It will be a special day for the sophomore. I think he will assert himself as our best player. Whether that comes in a win or a loss, God, we sure hope it's the former. I'm going to give it to him. Give me Marquette by 3. Let's call it 71-68 in a slightly lackluster performance by both teams, but Cheatham gets us over the edge.
Pete Mohan.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
You hate to be a lot of things right now.
I really hate to be that Lions fan that's just on cloud 9 right now after that Vikings punking by the Detroit Lions. But my prediction is that Marquette will lose by 4 points because we aren't able to hit the free throws that we need to down the stretch.
Oh, that'll be depressing.
Yeah. So start picturing it now.
Clang City at the free throw line?
I'm going to go with Vanderbilt by 4 in this one, guys.
You know what? I was saying earlier that I am always an optimist until I'm given a reason not to be. I think that I will be given a reason not to be at some point in the first game here against Vanderbilt. But until then, I like Marquette. I think I really believe that we added some shooters, and we're gonna have to see how they play out and when live bullets are flying. But I think we're able to knock down a lot of shots, and I think we're able to force a relatively new and still coming together Vanderbilt team into pressure, into mistakes and turnovers, and I think that'll make the difference for us. So I'm going to take Marquette by 6. I'm bullish, so hopefully that will come true.
I'm buying what you're selling, Mike. Bye.
All right, so that's going to do it for us here at the Real Chili Podcast for the 3rd episode. We'll be back next week to recap the Vanderbilt game and to preview the games coming up after that. Any final thoughts, fellas?
I was just going to say pray.
Pray. That's a good one. Yeah, I have that on repeat all week.
Who should pray?
Good question. Tune in Friday to find out.
Terry Mitchell.
Oh, jeez. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us this week here at the Real Chili Podcast. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.